Hello, fellow members of the collective. I am the Cryptic Chameleon. Thank you for joining me as we continue our journey to fight, adapt, and grow together. I hope you're doing well in that journey, and if not, I'm here to encourage you. Please, hang in there. I know it's tough, but we can all get better at being the best self that we possibly can. In the meantime, let's dive into Darksiders 2. I just mowed down a big boss, and we got the flood coming again. Or, well, they're not called the flood in this game. They're called the horde or the swarm. Yeah, it's no different. The swarm, the horde, the flood, they're all the same. It's all the same. It's just zombies. I thought I was in this room. How did one of those guys get in this room when I came from this room and I had slaughtered them all? Oh, you bunch of bull crap. I hate that guy. I hate him. I could change wallet. Yeah, I know I could change the wallet. But the thing is, I don't need to change my wallet. I intentionally have a separate wallet for my, my node when I run the Theta node. I have a separate wallet for that just because, you know what, then I can trade T-Fuel if I need to. I'm not big into the crypto stuff like right now. What I'm learning about that's really cool is something called podcasting 2.0. So podcasting has been around for a long time, but the problem is that the only way that podcasters, first of all, the problem with podcasting is over time it's become more centralized, and the problem with centralization for something like podcasting is that people can start to over time get censored. And basically, when podcasting moves to podcasting platforms, those platforms can say, hey, we don't like your content. Versus if you host your own podcast, you can. Uh-oh. This is going to be interesting. I'm going to back up. But the thing is that podcasting 2.0 isn't just about that. It's so they're adding new elements to podcasts, like chapters, which existed but weren't so easy to implement, and they're making it easier to implement. They're adding a people tag so that you can maybe eventually make it so that you can find when somebody is on somebody else's podcast, which is kind of cool. They're adding what's known as a value block, and they're trying to find ways to use Bitcoin Lightning to be able to do payments through Bitcoin wallets and stuff like that. Let me put this down for a second. I need to see if I can... No. I want to put this down for a second. I want to see if I can use my... I can't use my grippy thing through there. Okay, so that's not going to happen. But they're setting it up in such a way that... Imagine you could... You know how like with a YouTube Live... even when it's recorded, you can kind of participate in the chat. That's kind of what they want to do with podcasting. Imagine you're listening to a podcast, and you could see what other people are saying about that podcast in real time when they were listening to it, and you can join into that conversation. But then while you're doing that, imagine that you have something that allows you to, per minute of podcast listening, have a certain amount of Satoshis that you want to give to not just the podcast producer, but the Satoshis, which are a small piece of Bitcoin. Imagine that the Satoshis also, a percentage of them go to the podcast host, meaning the file host, and a portion of them goes to the podcast app that you're using because of their because they developed that app. Imagine a portion of what you're donating to a podcaster not only goes to the podcaster, but goes to the podcast host, goes to any people that are on that particular podcast episode. So it splits across the podcast, production team maybe for those people. So if there's an editor for that podcast, they get some of the money automatically. So it's really about making it so that you can earn more value. Just like with T-Fuel, as you're watching me, you know, it adds to a pool of T-fuel for me over time. So that's kind of the concept, is over time, being able to... Oh, I managed to kill him this time. Being able to add value to podcasters that is not, stuck in something like Patreon or PayPal, because we've seen people get deplatformed from Patreon and PayPal, and not necessarily just right-wing or extreme right or extreme left people. We've seen just like, Facebook or Twitter or PayPal being like, nah, we just don't like what this person's about. We feel like their message goes against our community guidelines. And so because their message goes against our community guidelines, we're going to go ahead and we're going to terminate their ability to make money. And the thing is that community guidelines are great. I believe in making people safe and, making it a safe environment to communicate in. But at the same time, like, if your community guidelines stifle free speech, there's a problem. I don't believe in violent speech. I don't believe in calling or inciting for violence. That stuff should not be happening. And, clearly racist speech is not good. Sexist speech is not good. But at the same time, like, you have to let people like that have their voice and then basically be able to call them out for being dumb. We live in the idea is having an economy of ideas. And that's not to say that I agree with people who say terrible, terrible things. I don't agree with racism. I don't agree with sexism. I don't agree with any sort of ism, generally speaking, including at this point religion, because it's not to say that I haven't had positives with religion. It is to say that over time I found that religion, I was using my religion as a mask. Instead of figuring out who I really was, I said, oh, I am this religion. And then I used that to hurt others in some ways. I used it to establish a certain level of control in my life. And that's not good. But at the same time, what I'm saying is, if you believe in something, I'm fine with you believing in something. I don't have to agree with you. And in fact, I can strongly disagree with you. You could say we should, I don't know, I got to think of something. We should kill all flowers, okay? You could say we should kill all flowers. And I'll be like, no, that's dumb. The reason why that's dumb is if you kill all flowers, we don't have any fruit or vegetables anymore, and you're removing beauty from the world. But, like, people have extremist views, and those extremist views are sometimes, wrong. Some extremist views can actually be right. For example, you could call it an extremist view to say no person should go hungry in this world. Especially no children should go hungry in that world. Well, that's an extremist view, because some people would say, well, it's those children's parents' faults that they don't have jobs. It's those parents' faults for being lazy, yada, yada, yada. But the fact is that people shouldn't have to go hungry. That's my belief. I don't care if you have a job or not. If you have to, if you're going to starve because you don't have a job, and you're legitimately trying to get a job, especially if you're trying to get a job. But even if you're not trying to get a job, even if you're just like in a place where you are so mentally broken down that you can't try to work, you should still be able to eat. You should still be able to have a roof over your head. And those types of things, like, those are extreme views in today's world, because in a capitalist society, when you say everybody should have a home, or at least a roof over their head, and everybody should have food to eat, well, that's like, oh, well, you're enabling people not to work. Well, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm making sure that people, feel safe and maybe have the ability to pursue what they need to for work or mental health.
Found the second piece.
Yes, I
You
did.
can feel its power within you.
Oh, you can.
The rod wills itself whole.
Yes, I'm
You
sure.
may be deaf to its cries, but I am not.
Yeah, sure.
And a final piece lies beyond this barrier, in an area heavily fortified by the shadow.
The
Okay.
Destroyer will not be pleased when I restore the Rod of Arathel.
Yeah.
The warriors may pay the price.
The
Uh-oh.
White City is lost to us. This broken world will soon be our grave. And yet we must fight on against the darkness, to uphold the light. If your actions hasten our end...
No offense, but why is she fighting in
May you live to
heels?
see the Destroyer take his last breath.
Like, I can't stand that sometimes, like, in movies or in games where, like, certain pieces of clothing are designed like heels. Look at this. Like, why would she fight in heels? Like, why would you fight in heels? That's ridiculous. Because it's uncomfortable. You know, in movies, I can't stand that when like somebody is fighting in heels. It's like, oh, just to let you know, everything I'm doing I'm doing in heels. Well, why are you doing it in heels? Rip the stupid stiletto off of the heels and at least try to get it down to a flat. Anyway, but what I was saying about free speech is this. You know, podcasting 2.0 is designed to make it so that podcasting remains a true free speech zone. And some people don't like that. Some people don't like the idea of something being free speech and actually think of it as a bad thing. I will never think of free speech as a bad thing. I believe the biggest problem is the algorithms that we use, not necessarily that people have free speech. The algorithms try to encourage hatred and try to show you things that you're going to react negatively to. Because why? That gets your eyes onto advertising, okay? That keeps you focused on the platform. And you know what? That's part of the reason why you see so much negative stuff that you don't agree with, or why people end up in an echo chamber because they only see the things that they agree with. So it's actually important to have a diversity of ideas so that you could see and hear what other people say and be able to have a conversation with them to say, well, actually, I agree with some of your points, but I don't agree with all of your points. You know, and people don't do that. They don't want to listen to each other. And so the idea of keeping podcasting an open platform for free speech, and not only that, but making it so that people can monetize across that without a fear of being deplatformed, is a huge deal. That's part of the reason why I like Theta. Theta is a blockchain-based video distribution system. Theta, if I wanted to, I could run my own Theta node and show up in other Theta nodes, like for other people that are running Theta nodes, and not be using theta.tv, but still get my message out there. And not that I have a divisive message. Some people are very divisive. Some people want to sow discord, and they're very good at sowing discord. Not discord. No, discord. That's right. So, like, some people are very, very good at sowing dissent and causing conflict. And you know, eventually, people just have to listen to those people and say, you know what, like, this is not the type of message that I want to hear. You know, at one point, I actually did listen to Alex Jones. And do you know what I discovered after listening to him for about a week? That I didn't like the message, that it was constantly just creating a panic. And that some of it may have had a grain of truth to it, but most of it was just screaming and yelling and trying to incite a panic. And I don't like feeling panicked. I don't have the time in my life or the mental energy to deal with panic all the time. I just don't. The world's not falling down around me. My freedom is not like always at risk. And so I stopped listening because I realized the junk was garbage. And then he got deplatformed. But the thing is, if people actually listened, yeah, a bunch of people are going to buy into his stuff because they don't want to hear any voices other than his. And that's their choice. Now, granted, some people can go to extremes and do really damaging things. Like we saw this week, the week I recorded this, there's some bad things happen in the U.S. Capitol when several people, took their beliefs to an extreme and decided to go with it. And what I will say is, truthfully, the majority of the people that were protesting or marching, the majority of them, if you look at the video, were peaceful. However, that doesn't change the fact that several of them were not peaceful and broke into Congress. That is unacceptable. You know, they took their beliefs to extremes, and then because they took their beliefs to extremes, they hurt and harmed others, and they actually created trauma for those watching. And our media didn't help because they were just, again, trying to make people panic. They were trying to take this belief or this event and make it into something that you needed to panic about right now, even though you weren't even there. And granted, yeah, this was a massive attack on are, and well, not even a massive attack, but it was an attack. And so my point is that, like, this type of stuff, yeah, we could try to censor it. We could try to basically stop voices like those that encourage this behavior from existing, because we think that, if we stop the voices, then people won't have anything to listen to. But the problem is, if you stop the voices, what happens is those voices find other platforms to go to. If Facebook and Twitter censor people, which they do, guess what? Other platforms are going to show up that only cater to those voices that got kicked off of Twitter and Facebook. And then you want to talk about echo chambers and extremes. If you take the people that were quote-unquote extreme on Twitter and Facebook and you give them their own platform, all that platform is going to be is an extreme for the opposite side. So, like, that's the problem, is we live in this world now where we're living in a world of extremes, and if you don't fit one extreme, they're going to kick you out. And then you're going to have to go to the other extreme, and there's no middle. The middle is gone. And that's not being overly political. You notice I'm not taking a side here. I'm not saying which side's right, which side's wrong, etc. What I'm saying is that if you don't have an economy of voices, if you don't have an economy of speech, this is what happens. You end up dividing people even more. If you say, well, you're not allowed to be in my tribe because I don't like what you're saying, then that person's going to start their own tribe. And you're not going to like that tribe because you already disagreed with what they were saying and kicked them out of your tribe. But that tribe is going to become even more extreme. And what we're doing is we're basically destroying ourselves by destroying any concept of having common decency towards each other, but between, having the ability to say, you know what, no, I don't agree with your ideas. In fact, your ideas are appalling to me. But you know what? That doesn't mean I hate you as a person. That doesn't mean that I think you are lower than a human being. Does not mean that I see you as quote-unquote the other that needs to be fought. Instead, I will disagree with you and I'll tell you why, but I'll also try to understand where you're coming from. If somebody is clearly a racist, I'm never going to agree with them. Ever. Period. Like, I'm not going to agree with them that some other race that doesn't match my skin or my country is going to be lesser than me. I'm never going to believe that. Period. And that's just the way that I am. But, hey, I'll listen to your reasons why you think that somebody might be, lower than somebody else. I'll listen to it. And, you might make a point that I'll be able to say, well, you know what? Like, I see what you're saying there, but you're forgetting about this, or you're not seeing this. The point is, again, to have the conversation. You're not going to convert people by calling them names and screaming at them. You're not going to change somebody's heart by calling them a terrible thing or classifying them as lesser than human in your eyes. Oh, gosh, here we go again. You change hearts by loving people from where they are and then working back from there. But that's not what we do. We just feel it's a lot easier to decry people and scream and yell and call them names. You'll notice that on both sides, like the sides that are, especially the sides that scream for tolerance, it's so funny. They scream for tolerance and then they turn around and they bash people who do not meet their definition of tolerance. And that, to me, is ridiculous. You're being extremely hypocritical to say, oh, you need to be more tolerant, but I'm not going to be tolerant of you. In fact, I'm going to decry you as less than human yourself. That's kind of some garbage. You can't say, oh, be more tolerant, and then turn around and say this person's evil. It doesn't work that way. You can't have it both ways. You can't scream tolerance, 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 and then turn around and say, oh, evil, 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 when the person isn't tolerant in the way that you want. It doesn't work that way. The game's telling me to change weapons. There's probably a good reason for that. Oh, this is cool. So, I know I went on a bit of a rant here, but the fact is that our world is very horribly broken in that regard. And that's why I do stream on Theta. Because I stream on Theta not because I believe in people doing or saying things that I disagree with and that like I believe that in what they're saying. I do it because I believe that everybody, even the most extreme person, deserves to have a voice. And that doesn't mean that what they're saying is necessarily more valid than anything else that anybody else is saying. In fact, it could be less valid. If you're calling to harm others in some way, physically, mentally, emotionally, you know what the fact is that you should not be taken seriously. And some people will take you seriously, and that's bad, but that doesn't mean that your voice should be taken away from you or you should be thrown in prison unless you are actually calling for very real violence towards people, or you're doing things in such a way that actually incites people to violence towards other people. Then that is harmful. And that should not be allowed. You know, there's a difference. You know, if you're saying go and do something that's clearly illegal, then yeah, maybe you should not be speaking. Although there's conversations around that even. For example, take the idea of drugs. All right. So drugs are a big topic in the United States, especially, you know, certain drugs that have, you know, in more recent days become more acceptable, such as marijuana. You know, but the conversation was always drugs bad, drugs bad, drugs bad. Nobody bothered to research the effects of these drugs. For example, the only thing people used to hear about in regards to LSD or psilocybin or any of those other drugs that are currently illegal here is that, oh, you could get a bad trip. You could end up hurting yourself. Well, what they didn't tell you is that the ego death that comes along with those quote-unquote trips, not necessarily the bad ones, but just trips in general, the hallucinations can actually help to heal deep trauma and have actually helped people with PTSD to heal from PTSD because it gives them a way of visualizing what they're afraid of and facing it in a way that's safe. It also helps to support what's known as ego death, where you care less about just yourself and more about the whole. You know, and yet those drugs are, and you can't overdose on things, to the best of my knowledge, from what they've researched. You can't overdose on magic mushrooms or on LSD. Granted, you could take a lot and be tripping for days, from what I've heard. I've never tried either one of these. But I'm saying, according to the research, yeah, you could be tripping for days. You could take so much that you don't come out of it for days. And if you're in an unsafe situation or an unsafe frame of mind, or you're in a situation where people take advantage of you, you could end up hurting yourself because of the hallucinations you're having. But the fact is that in controlled and safe circumstances, these have actually shown to be therapeutic. Now, is that an extreme view that I say maybe we should take a better look at, you know, these so-called like terrible drugs that have been demonized and made illegal over the years? I don't think so. And that's not saying, I'm not saying go and do these drugs. I'm not saying if it's illegal, go and ignore the law. But what I am saying is that, you know, maybe we should question that law or those laws. Maybe we should question the mentality behind those laws and also see the damage that those laws have done to a variety of different people, including the largest prison population in the world in the United States. You know, the majority of the prison population is, you know, around illegal drugs, you know, and that is, you know, sad because some of those drugs weren't really hurting anybody. I'm taking this guy out from a distance, man. And that's the saddest part, is that a lot of times these drugs were not actually hurting people. And not hurting the people that took them, not hurting those around the people that took them. You know, it's... I'm trying to take this guy out. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. What the heck? Where did that guy come from? Why am I out of... I died. So, you know, yes, I'm going on a rant this episode about free speech. But the thing is, without free speech, we don't have a free society. If we live in a in a world where we can't hear an opinion that is counter to ours without losing our minds. If we live in a world where the entire voice of our culture is driven by 4 or 5 sources, and think about it, that is the world that we live in. Even if you're in a different country than the United States, most of the news you get is filtered through 4 or 5 different lenses, and 3 out of those 5 voices are the same. Does anybody see why that's a problem, to only have one viewpoint on something? Well, yeah, that's the right way. Is it, though? You're turning around and saying that every viewpoint, aside from the one that is being shared by media or shared by your friends or your family, is wrong. That's not exactly a good way of looking at life. You're basically saying, I'm right, you're wrong, tough. And that's a very closed-minded way of living life, you know? And that's also harmful, because when you surround yourself in an echo chamber, you will reach a point where you don't see other people as people. You see other people as, you know, as just enemies because they disagree with you. You know, and they might disagree with you on some really fundamental truths. And that hurts. That's hard to hear, that like somebody might say, no, I don't believe that we should support people who, you know, don't have jobs. I don't believe that they deserve to eat. They might say it in a different way, but that's hard to swallow. But at the same time, you may want to listen to their arguments, and then when they tell you why, you could turn around and say, well, actually, we actually agree on this point. We don't believe that, you know, everything should, you know, that people shouldn't get help in the process of being provided for. Like, for example, I think that in some ways our welfare system is messed up because it doesn't help people to get out of the situation that they're in. It may help to provide for them, and I think that's important. But it doesn't provide much to help people to get new skills or to help them get out of depression or anything else. What it primarily does is just it provides money. And don't get me wrong, I still believe in that. I believe in providing money for food, shelter, clothing, etc. But what I don't believe in, I don't believe that, you know, we shouldn't do more. If somebody is depressed or somebody's addicted to drugs that are causing them harm or addicted to other behaviors, then part of the support they get should be healthcare, mental health. Part of the support that they get should be job skill training, like good job skill training, not just like generic job skill training or training you how to make a better resume, but actually like working with local people, like local business owners, to try and say, well, what skills do you need in the local area? What business owners need certain skills in the local area? And how can we work with those businesses to ensure that, you know, these people that don't have jobs can have jobs and can have the skills to get jobs? I don't necessarily think that it should just be a national, you know, a national program. I think that there needs to be more local programs where you're working with local businesses to really find out what skills they need and to find out what it is, and then to train people. You know, that's one way of thinking about it. Other people might agree with me, and other people might disagree with me. You know, it's just a matter of different ways of thinking about the same thing.
I cannot.
So anyway, rant over. But what I'm basically saying is free speech is critical to a world of greater tolerance. Because if you can accept somebody who disagrees with you, even if they have a very fundamentally flawed way of thinking, if you can accept them as a human being, and that maybe where they're coming from is a position of great pain. Maybe they believe what they believe because when they grew up, that's what they were taught, and they were living in an abusive situation or a harmful family situation. If you can accept that, and that maybe some of these harmful views come from their own insecurities, and you can still care about them as a person, then that's going to help you immensely, and that's going to help the world immensely. But if we as a society are just going to say these views are evil and wrong, and there's no hope for that person, that they should just be locked up for their views, and that's a different thing, especially if they're not acting on those views. So they may have poor views, but they may never act on those views. Well, if they're not acting on those harmful views, then guess what? Like, there's not that big of a deal there. They might believe something, but if they don't act on that belief, it's not a problem. Just like you might think to yourself, I want to smack somebody in the face, but you're not going to do it. You know? Yay! We finished this just at the end of the video here. I have the scepter, or the rod of Arafel. Okay. So I got to return to the Crystal Spire, but first, we're going to pause here. We're going to pause the video. I want to thank you for joining me for this video. Thank you for listening to my rant on free speech while we're playing. But sometimes there are topics that I'm passionate about, and that's one of them. But that being said, if you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing here, please hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe, and hello to Hidino. Thank you for being here. But if you like what you're seeing or hearing, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button on Theta. But if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to click the link to join my Discord. I would love to hear from you there. And I want to also remind you, I do have the Collective Cast. It's a podcast about my personal journey of growth and development, which is still very, very shaky. And I appreciate your encouragement and hope to be able to encourage you in your journey as well. In the meantime, thank you for being here. The stream will continue shortly, but for those watching the video, your time is up. Catch you next time.